Hello, everyone. My name is Bryson Tyrrell. I am a staff systems development engineer on the API platform team here at Jamf. Today, I'm here to talk to you about some work that we've been doing. And what we're discussing is a concept to explore an improved developer and customer experience when creating and using new apps and integrations built on top of Jamf's available APIs. Because of how early we are in this process, what we talk about today may not reflect where we end up on this journey, but bear with me. All right, so the app platform concept. What I'm going to be going over here today is where we're at right now, the marketplace of today. As a part of that, we're going to be talking about the developer experience, and we're also going to be talking about the customer experience. And then after we've gone through these different scenarios, we're actually going to then talk about maybe the marketplace of tomorrow and what we might be doing. So I've invited some old friends to help walk through these experiences from the two different perspectives. Some of you might remember Pat and Patty. For those who are familiar, Pat here, he is a Jamf customer. And Patty is actually a software developer who is going to be building some stuff on top of Jamf's APIs that Pat might want to use. So let's kick things off actually with Patty. So this story actually does start off on the developer side because our developers are the ones who build things that our customers can then take advantage of. So Patty has an idea. She happens to use a really popular chat service. You know, every single organization has one. IT at her org uses Jamf. And Patty thinks that there's an opportunity here to create an app that integrates Jamf and this chat platform and provides some real value to admins and support staff. Now, for Patty to figure out what she can do with Jamf APIs, she has the developer portal. It has documentation on the different product APIs that we have available, as well as available webhooks and some examples around those. So this is going to be her first stop, really, when she's exploring and trying to figure things out. So part of this is Patty needs to figure out, I have this idea for a chat integration. What does it do? How is it going to do that? Well, the big thing is notifications, right? It's the hallmark feature of any chat integration. For Jamf, that's going to be webhooks. When she's looking at the documentation, she'll see what events are available and how she can transform those into meaningful notifications. Another big thing would be search. It would be really handy to maybe be able to search things within Jamf and then be able to render that back inside the chat program. Well, that will just be API access. So she can browse through the API documentation and see what's available and see what she might be able to query on and then how she can get that data and render it back. Now, the developer portal does provide examples of APIs and webhooks for her, but part of this is the understanding that right now, every single customer has their own instance of Jamf Pro on its own domain, and she will need to collect all that information in order to make the required request. She can't just go to one place to actually do that and get different data based upon who is actually using her chat service. So on the other side, she also needs a solution for receiving events back from all these different sources and then being able to identify which customers those sources came from. So today, the way that Patty would address this is twofold. One, she needs to create some sort of form that an admin can fill out to fill in all the information necessary for her integration to work. To do that, she needs to create some really detailed documentation that admins can follow on how to complete all those required setup steps. And as far as distributing this so that it's discoverable and that those setup instructions are readily available, the place to really do this is the marketplace. So the marketplace allows developers, third parties, partners, allows them to list their apps and services, but it only contains the information for the listing. It doesn't do anything else today. So this is where Patty can, create a description, link out to her documentation, link out to that form that she created on her service, and then, hopefully point admins in the right direction, which leads us to Pat. So on this side of it, we're going to be following Pat's journey as he goes to use something from the marketplace. So he's an admin. He works at a company that uses Jamf to manage devices, and he's trying to find ways to extend that platform. So on the marketplace, Pat's org uses that same chat application. So he finds Patty's app for it, and he decides he wants to give it a try. So he clicks on the links, and he goes out to the documentation. So either way, if he goes out directly to the setup form or just right out to the documentation page, he's going to end up getting the instructions that Patty created. So he's got a form to fill out that needs the URL to his Jamf Pro server, a username, a password for API username and password for API access, and he starts following those instructions, which leads him to log in. Then he's got to go to settings, click on users and groups. He has to create a new standard account. And then he's got to enter in a lot of information on this screen. And, he needs to be sure that he saves the password that he creates because he's going to have to hand that off back to Patty's application. And then he's got to scroll through all the server objects and actions that are required for her application that she has documented and click all those boxes and make sure she saves it. Okay, so now that Pat's done all this, setup's complete, he goes back, fills out the form, and he's ready to use that app, but it's not working. He's not actually getting any notifications back to his chat application from Jamf Pro. So what's going on here? Well, this is a case where Pat had actually forgotten to go to the next page in the instructions and then create the webhooks to actually deliver the events so that he can get those notifications. But not a major issue here. Following the instructions, Pat logs back into Jamf Pro, goes back to settings, clicks on webhooks. He creates a webhook. This one's going to be for device add to DEP. It's a good one to get notified on. And he enters in a URL for Patty's service and a username and password that was generated for him. And then he's got to repeat this for every other event that he wants notifications on. Okay, so now notifications are finally working. They're coming into the chat app, but search isn't. Search is not working from the chat app to Jamf Pro. Why? Well, as it turns out, this time it was another configuration issue. There were actually permissions that got missed when he went through that user creation form the first time. So Pat figures out what he missed, and he updates those API permissions, and things are working again. All right. So this scenario right here, I did paint this exchange in what looks like a worst case scenario, but in the week leading up to the recording of this session, I saw something not too dissimilar play out on Twitter with an admin venting their frustration at getting an API integration to work because of the incorrect user settings that were initially done and some of the error messages that were displayed. And the fact of the matter is that manual setup is always error prone, and great documentation does not ensure a zero failure rate. It causes frustration for customers, it causes frustration for developers. But right now, it's the only path that's really available for Patty to make her app available. And, the other part of this is Pat only wanted to try this, right? It may not even work out. It may not meet his needs, or may not actually behave the way that he was kind of hoping it would. So if he decides he's not going to use this integration, he's got to clean up everything. He's got to delete all those webhooks. He's got to get rid of that service account to ensure that Patty's app no longer has access to his Jamf Pro environment. And if he does that, Patty's not aware that he did that, and she's left as to guessing why she has a bunch of 401 errors popping up inside her logs and metrics. So admins and developers alike, they share different amounts of burden here for the third-party development experience. You know, for admins, the setup, it's manual, complex. They're on the hook for creating all those resources. You know, and likewise, removing access is also manual as well. And there's always the chance that something might be missed over unless it was really well documented what the person setting up that integration created. There could be things like groups left over, extension attributes, possibly scripting, depending on what kind of integration it was. So there's a lot going on there. From the developer standpoint, things are also equally complex in different ways. Developers have to implement their own version of an onboarding process. And while if they build multiple integrations, they could just write off the same one they did or copy and paste that. Every different developer might do this differently. Some actually might have a prompt for a full admin account login, and then they API script a whole bunch of automation. And, you know, some admins are not always comfortable with that. They're handing over admin credentials to automate a setup process. It's, you know, not always the best thing to do. So if everyone's doing everything differently, then that means there's really no standard to it. And, you know, it's always a question mark as to, well, how is this one going to behave compared to the next one? So ultimately, as we're talking through this, there's just a lot of complexity all over the place. So what do? Well, we work to make it simpler. And how do we do that? Well, the big thing is we should find a way of standardizing the way that Jamf apps are actually made. So if there is a blueprint to follow for all of our third-party developers, then customers know what to expect every single time. It also takes out a lot of the guesswork on the developer as to how are they actually going to build something and then expose it to customers for using. Simplifying the development process. As we saw with the Patty example, there was a lot that she had to come up with in order to actually make this work, and she might implement things differently from another developer, even though they're both using APIs in similar ways. So if we can take away a lot of that and simplify the experience for getting started with developing apps against Jamf's APIs, that will be a major win. And that should translate, hopefully, into a simpler customer experience where you aren't going through a PDF and you aren't following a long list of instructions on the things that you need to set up and create in order to start using a third-party integration. So this brings us to the topic of the marketplace of tomorrow. And let's follow Patty's story again, except this time, let's see what we can do differently. All right, so Patty still has an idea. She has a chat service that she wants to build an integration to Jamf Pro for. One of the first things we can do to help Patty's journey on here is to actually expand app management in the marketplace to support configuration and what permissions that she requires and what events she wants to receive, and not just relegate it to being a listing. So there's additional things that Patty would now provide here. She has a selection tool to be able to state, I need these APIs and then these events, and she can provide the URLs for her service to actually receive those events as a part of this. All of the state for Patty's application will actually be a part of this new app configuration that Jamf manages. So the next thing involves having to manage all those different servers that are out there for Jamf customers. If we create a unified API gateway for all requests, and we remove that additional requirement for knowing where to route requests for the particular customer, that simplifies a lot of things for Patty as a developer. She just hits the one endpoint, and she is able to interact with data from different customers. To do that, we would remove the need for service accounts or even the requirement for admins to create service accounts, and we would issue access tokens on a per customer basis if they want to use these applications. So now there's one API to go to, and there is one access token that links a third-party developer to a customer that has approved their access to their data. Automating the delivery of webhook events. So instead of admins having to go and create the needed webhooks to be able to deliver those events back to third-party developers at different URLs for those developers, we can instead have a centralized location that actually takes in events and then delivers them on the behalf of third parties that have been approved. A part of this is also going to be some requirements on Jamf to actually vet and review these applications that are being put onto the marketplace and being published. So going forward, if Patty were to submit her app, Jamf staff would then test and review that application prior to it being made available. So there is some quality assurance by Jamf as to these integrations that are coming onto the marketplace. So these changes to the developer experience, how do these come down to affect Pat's experience? Well, as before, Pat is going to find Patty's app for the chat service on the marketplace. The difference here, because Patty got to actually register and configure the APIs and events that her application needs, when Pat goes to use it, he can instead get a prompt with an easy-to-understand summary of the different APIs and the different events that her app wants. And he can approve or deny at this point if he actually wants to do that. It's something that's easy to understand, and it's able to be captured in a single form. Accepting initiates a handoff where Pat is redirected to Patty's app with a code to exchange for an access token that's specific for this app and his tenant. So now Patty is able to use this token with only the permissions that Pat has granted. And at the same time, event delivery has already begun, and Patty's application can now send notifications to the chat service. That is a night and day experience to what we have today. Remember, Pat only wanted to try this. And because it was just this one form where he accepted the permissions to it, he actually has the ability now to go back into the marketplace and revoke it and immediately cut off API access and cut off and stop event delivery right then and there. And because he's doing this through this platform, Patty's app can get a notification stating, hey, this customer uninstalled your app, and then she can go and clean up all of their data and ensure that she's not attempting to make API requests to something that she no longer has access to. So that overall improves a lot of things about the developer experience on the other end of it when someone stops using the software. So and now we come full circle to this original question. What is the Jamf app platform concept, and why is it being labeled a developer preview? So the app platform itself is work that we have started exploring these ideas. And we wanted to enable a better experience as a whole and enable a whole new generation of apps that are a seamless process for developers and customers when it comes to building them and using them. This is a glimpse of where we want to go. The overview I've shown you today is based upon prototypes and proofs of concepts that we have already built. And it's where we want to take our marketplace. It's where we want to take our developer tools and our frameworks. You can expect to hear a lot more from us in the future as we continue to iterate on these ideas. For now, though, I want to thank you for sitting in and listening to this developer preview, and I hope you had a fantastic JNUC.